Hello and welcome to this spotlight episode on the Steam Whistle. A quick look at little known aspects from the early days of Steam. Ask anyone today what sound a steam locomotive makes and it's invariably choo choo! The sound of the steam whistle has become synonymous with the steam locomotive itself. But yet, in its earliest days, the steam locomotive had no means of audible warning other than its own chuffing, hissing and clanking. The earliest means of audible warning adopted by the Stockton and Darlington Railway in 1825 was a bell, which was to be rung by the driver, but how useful this was in practice is not clear. The Liverpool and Manchester Railway of 1830 went one better, and in true road coach style introduced post horns and bugles. The locomotive firemen, the train guards and the crossing keepers were issued with post horns, which they were to blow as they approached the road crossings, stopping places and other locations where it was useful or advisable to sound the approach of the train. In fact, fines were introduced in order to encourage the guards and firemen to blow their horns. Incidentally, the crossing keepers were also to continuously ring a bell as a train passed over the level crossing as a warning to road users, and this is a tradition now fossilised in American railroad practice. But where did the steam whistle and its distinctive choo-choo sound come from? According to the ever-unreliable Clement E. Stretton, he states that early in 1833 a train on the Leicester and Swannington Railway collided with a farmer's cart on a level crossing near the Stag and Castle Inn. As a result of this accident, George Stephenson himself instructed the locomotive foreman, Mr. Cabry, to devise some means of audible warning, and the first steam whistle, alias the Steam Trumpet, was invented by a musical instrument maker on King Street in Leicester. It's a lovely story, and it's one that's often told, but there's absolutely no basis in fact for it. There's no record of such an accident in the newspapers of the time, or even in the board minutes, and according to the census, no musical instrument maker ever had premises or lived on King Street in Leicester at the right time. Drawings, however, do exist showing Leicester and Swannington locomotives duly equipped with this steam trumpet, with a rotary plug valve and a conical resonator. And this is important in our little piece of detective work, and we need to look for inspiration away from steam locomotives towards a more ecclesiastical setting, and we'll come on to this steam trumpet later. The more reliable claim as to the invention of the steam whistle comes from the Dowlais Ironworks in South Wales. Zira Colburn describes in 1871 how the steam whistle was invented by a Welshman, William Stevens, who was a workman at the Dowlais Ironworks about 1833. In 1835, Thomas Turner from Sharp, Roberts and Company of Manchester went on a job to Dowlais to set up some line shafting. Whilst there, he noticed Stevens' steam whistle. Turner made a drawing of the whistle and brought it home with him to Manchester. He showed it to his foreman, Mr. Rose, who in turn showed it to Alexander Fife, the Manchester locomotive superintendent of the Liverpool and Manchester Railway, who, quote, adopted it at once, end quote. Thomas Turner was later employed by Bayer Peacock and Company of Manchester, and his original sketch was preserved in their archives. A steam whistle works rather like a tin whistle, a recorder, or some organ pipes. Air at pressure passes through a narrow opening or aperture and is forced against a narrow lip or languid. This causes the column of the air in a pipe to vibrate, making a note. The longer and the wider diameter of the pipe, the more air in that column, and thus the deeper the note. But there's also another claimant for the originator of the steam whistle, or the steam trumpet, William Hill, a prestigious London organ builder. The story goes that William Hill was approached by the directors of the London and Birmingham Railway to devise some means of audible warning for its trains. Hill was used to making large organ pipes which made a lot of noise. William Hill was of an inventive turn of mind and came up with a large organ pipe as a result. This organ pipe was, depending on the source, either blown by steam from the boiler or using compressed air driven by bellows, and the latter is probably more feasible. But anyway, he invented this high-pressure noisemaker which worked exactly like an organ reed pipe. Instead of a jet of pressurized air being aimed at a languid to make the note, instead it sets a brass tongue in motion. It causes this tongue to vibrate. This is held in place against a metal shallot using a wooden wedge and inserted in a boot. On its own, this makes a very sad sort of quacking noise. What it needs is something to help focus a sound and to make a note, a resonator. And this resonator for reed stops is usually conical. And again, as with a whistle-type organ pipe, the longer the resonator, the deeper the note. Now remember the 1833 Cadbury drawing with the ice cream cone-shaped whistle on the boiler. I am an organist, and I also used to be an organ tuner. Looking at this Cadbury drawing, my first impression was, that's not a whistle, that's a trumpet pipe. What we're looking at is a steam trumpet, something that produces its sound not using a whistle but using a vibrating reed, and a conical resonator as we see on the drawing to make the note. So whilst the story from Clement Stretton about an accident in March 1833 may not be strictly true, what we're seeing is the earliest form of steam trumpet. We're not seeing a steam whistle. Instead of going choo choo, it would have gone parp parp. But what about William Hill of London? Well, William Hill is traditionally credited with the invention of the steam trumpet, using a set of high-pressure organ pipes as a means of audible warning. But, quote, the effect was so grand and imposing, end quote, that people, instead of running away from the sound, were attracted to it. And as a means of audible warning, the steam trumpet was not a success. Hill, however, was at the same time building what was then the biggest and grandest pipe organ in the world for Birmingham Town Hall. It's still there and still in use, and it's absolutely magnificent. In 1840, he added what was then the loudest organ stop in the world, a high-pressure grand ophicleide, which was louder than the combined full organ of all the other stops playing together. The story goes that in creating this magnificent organ stop, William Hill used his experience from his experiments for the London and Birmingham Railway, and his grand and imposing steam trumpet became the grand ophicleide on the Birmingham organ. Some stories suggest exactly the same organ pipes were used as on the locomotive steam trumpet as on the grand ophicleide organ stop, but that is unlikely. As Monsieur Poirot would say, it's all in the little graisseurs. So whilst the invention of the steam whistle may be credited to Welshman William Stevens, the steam trumpet, which is clearly derived from pipe organ practice, may indeed have been created for use on the Leicester and Swannington Railway, or by William Hill, an organ builder of London. Although to many writers, steam whistle and steam trumpet are the same thing, we can conclude from looking at this problem as an organ builder that they are very different. They work using different means and make very, very different sounds. So that's been a quick look at the steam whistle and at the steam trumpet. I hope you have enjoyed this video, and if you have, please show your appreciation by liking, sharing and subscribing. And see you next time on Rail Story.